My name is John Mclaughlin. I'm Managing Director of AES, which is Alarm Equipment Supplies. We're a distributor of electronic alarm equipment and CCTV and all different types of security equipment throughout Ireland. And we also have a second company, Burgolram, which is a well-known installer throughout Cork and Cork County.
Why are we skeptical? Because it's a commitment of time and resources. The cost is heavily subsidized, as you know, and we'll talk a little bit more about that later on. So financially, the outlay is not a lot, but it's commitment of time from your team. So why are we skeptical, really? Do you think?
I suppose we're a small company. I just stick with AES for the moment because it's a small company, and everybody had their role. And when you start talking about Six Sigma or start talking about these different theories, you kind of open avenues, and it's ignorance on my part, I suppose, and on the board, that we didn't know enough about them, and I suppose you're always afraid that you get down a rabbit hole, and we've all been there. You go down this rabbit hole, it's not adding to your business, and you're a couple of months into this and you find, what have we done, and our biggest resource is time. Is our most valuable resource. The money aspect, through Leo and these places, the finance side of it wasn't big. The time we put into it, it's important that you do it. If you're going to do it right, So that's what you'd be afraid of.
Did you have an awareness of lean beforehand? I mean, you mentioned Six Sigma there, which we tend not to mention at all, but did you have an awareness of lean in the business? Or yourself beforehand?
I did this course during COVID, and it was just a kind of a 2-hour-long lecture. Now some of the principles are so easy that keep it simple, stupid. I'd have missed the essence of them because it didn't relate directly to me or my business. That's the big difference with Jigsaw and this course was really, you're given an introductory, but if I could mention Michael, he really gets into your business. He really asks you the right questions, and he challenges you in the best possible way, because we've done jobs for the last 20 years in the same way. Nobody has ever asked us to stop and say, why are you doing it that way?
Okay, you mentioned the Six Sigma part because for anyone who doesn't know, there's lean and then there's Six Sigma, and usually with smaller businesses, unless they're very high volume manufacturing or production driven, or they've a high volume of data, Six Sigma doesn't really come into it. They're two different kind of schools of thought. Lean at this level is definitely far more simple. As I had on that slide earlier, it's not always easy to implement because it requires change, and I'm sure who likes change, but the concepts of it are simple and kind of challenging. We'll talk through some of them a bit later on as well. Program itself, there isn't an awful lot to learn. I think you might agree with me on this, that when you take part in the 2 group sessions, which are the training component of it, most of the training component is the participants talking about the challenges in their business, as opposed to that kind of lecture on lean and here it is and why you have to do it as well. When you mentioned that when Mick started to Mick McAuliffe that worked with you on the project from Jigsaw, you mentioned that he started to ask questions, which kind of a coaching approach. What kind of came out in that dialogue?
Very practical stuff. I suppose the problem is when you're so close to something, you can't see the wood from the trees. You're so used to doing so. Just for AES, one of the easiest solutions was probably 60% of our sales is from one product range, and that product range is throughout the stores, and the way it comes in, and it's now under the counter.
Okay.
So, most of the customers that come into the customer's showroom gets the product. It's under the counter, so there's no walking down the stores, walking back up. I forgot this. It's there. So it's so easy, and the time spent, huge time savings on it. No, and that was a kind of feature throughout the whole process. That there was no big shot of lightning. So that we haven't restructured the business, we haven't restructured the stores. We just changed things around that gave us huge time savings.
And it's that small kind of incremental change. I know when we were discussing it yesterday, you reckon that those kind of changes in the warehouse, bringing we call it point of view storage, so bringing very common items closer to where they're required, and even understanding that there are things that are higher volume or higher demand, and making that kind of simple layout change. I think you were talking about in terms of like a 30% increase in efficiency for the warehouse staff.
I would see that in terms of hours. It was nearly 15 hours a week that instead of them working in the stores, they were actually on doing sales calls.
And was that 15 hours a week? And I mean, was that for every person or across the team?
That was across the 3 guys that are in the stores. There were 15 hours a week that they spent on sales calls.
So that's 5 hours a person. Yeah,
it is. To get those sales calls done, you were looking at employing somebody, which is going to cost us in the region of 65k a year. So that's a huge saving for a small company.
Yeah, and I mean it's a cost avoided. It doesn't put it, as you said, it doesn't put 60 or 65,000 back in your pocket, but it stops you having to spend it as well. But just for everyone here, I mean, I know myself, if you think 5 hours, that a change in layout, change of structure can give you back 5 hours. For some of us, that would mean just getting home on time, and not having that kind of hassle. But as you said, you can reinvest that 5 hours from that team, and you could put it into the sales call and offset, maybe not avoid completely the need to hire additional salespeople, but delay it until you have the full capacity as well. You mentioned about the salespeople there earlier as well. What was the big changes there?
You see, because these guys were making new business calls, these 15 hours a week new business calls, we were getting new customers without having to employ another rep and all the expenses with that. So we were increasing our business, I would say, in about 300k a year, so that was quite a big increase in our sales, and we work on small margins, so every time you add another body to the pool, it's a hefty expense, on the small margins that we work on.
Yeah, and it's such an interesting point. I mean, so that, like you mentioned about the potential cost of a salesperson and a car and fuel and all that goes with it, but if you can get the same effectiveness or the same productivity and output with the existing resources, you avoid that. I think we call it cost avoidance, but you have this headcount avoidance, that you postpone the need to hire an additional person, or the additional hiring goes into perhaps a higher value part of the business, and then the increase in sales. And I think with everybody here, and I think everybody will agree with this, the challenge to recruit at the moment might get easier with some of the changes we're seeing in the tech companies and so on, but the challenge to recruit and the limitations in availability of resources is one of the greatest challenges that we're going to be facing in this in the coming years, is the shortage of resources and of skilled resources as well. So that inward focus on doing more with what you have really is kind of key. What size is the team in AES?
Just a team of 5. So like you've 3 in the stores, you've myself, and then you've got 1 on the road. And I suppose the biggest I suppose savings for us was because we have 2 companies here, and Burgolram is a big customer of AES.
Okay.
The interaction between AES and Burgolram was causing a huge problem, which I had never realized. I'd never seen it. And because I wasn't spending so much time in stores and on counters and, generally dealing with AES problems, I had more time to look at things kind of helicopter view, look at it more strategy, look at down the road, 5 years, start doing a bit of planning, stuff that was kind of being left either to late at night or to weekends, so. But when I started looking at the interaction between AES and Burgolram were causing severe problems for AES. Because they're on their doorstep and because they're so connected, like we have the same owner, so you naturally have an affinity towards them, but they were causing huge inefficiencies within AES. So we started to look at that. There was a huge amount of time taken up by the lads on that one alone, you know, and it came back to even returns of product, you know, in giving out, because Burgolram is an installer and they might be doing a job in Kilkenny. AES were giving them double stock so they wouldn't have to return. They were really getting everything from AES, and there was little coming back, you know, so we were able to look at that whole thing and streamline it.
And did it, and I know when you tackled the projects, you tackled them one in AES and then one in Burgolram, and they were somewhat treated as in separate entities, with the eye and the other. But did you find the process asked, the questions got uncomfortable, or the challenging became uncomfortable in a positive way, I suppose?
They did, and again, Michael saved my hide here, because he was able to, I would say, put questions and challenge others in the team that would have been made very difficult for me to do. The motto around here at the moment now is, so what, you know? So what does it make? Why are we doing it? You know, what are we getting out of it? You know, and I suppose you're questioning everything that you're doing in a systematic way. It's not you coming in every day and there's a question on your desk. It's not like that. We look at our process, and Burgolram are ISO, so our processes are well documented. So it's actually easier for Burgolram to do this lean, but the rewards are even bigger again, because if anybody knows the security industry, in any installation business, labour is probably that's where you make or break a sale. You know what I mean? That's where your profit is.
Yeah, and the administration burden on an industry like that is phenomenal. You know, and we've worked with a few alarm companies and seen that as well. The regulation is tough. And you mentioned ISO, and I think an interesting point with ISO is, you know, yes, you need some businesses need to do it. Okay, not every business needs to do ISO, although the practice of documenting processes and so on is good practice. But ISO doesn't necessarily focus in on it's about standardization, but it doesn't necessarily focus in on efficiency. And that's what Lean will do. It will take those standards, yes, follow them, but are we doing them in the most efficient way? And the point you made there about the, you know, so what kind of question reminds me of another client actually in Cork, who they use the question of, could we do this in a leaner way, became a key question in all of their kind of meetings when they were talking about a process. And because the team had such a positive attitude to the efficiency side of it, it got completely depoliticized, or the harm got taken out. It wasn't seen as saying, what do you mean, could I do it in a leaner way? You know, it was almost a challenge. You know, here's the process, it's worked. Could we do that in a leaner way? And then we challenged ourselves, and the team challenged themselves to see, well, actually, is there a more efficient way to do it, or an easier way, or one that improves the quality, one that's better for the business, one that's better for the customer? The involvement of the team, which is kind of key here as well. How did that work for you in either of the projects?
I think it worked very well over the whole process. But I think at the start, everybody thinks when you say leaner way or more efficient way, time in motion always comes up. You know, that type of study, and it's not that. It's like the guys that when they got involved in it, they found their own kind of efficiencies. They found better ways of doing something that they'd inherited a lot of this stuff, you know. So when they seen their time being freed up and used for different stuff, their job became more, you know, a broader spectrum of activities and more interesting. And like they still do it to this day. We meet every month, and part of our meeting is lean, you know, and we don't call it lean, we just call it, you know, any ideas, you know, anything we can do better. We were in the process of looking at automation, and I'm so glad we did the lean before we did any automation, because one of the things about automation is that it's just as easy to lean to automate an inefficient system as it is to automate an efficient system. And once it's automated, you have it for life, you know. There's no way of getting it out of there, you know. So it was perfect timing for us.
And one of the because a lot of people will talk about digital, and we hear a lot of talk about digital and digital transformation, and lean is kind of that. You know, it's not digital transformation, but it's the starting point of that. And quite frequently within a lean project, you will work on improving processes to a point where the obvious next step improvement is for some kind of software or automation or a fancier Excel spreadsheet or a new software accounts package. You can only polish it so far. But what I would say to you, and Jonathan, nodding your head, I know this was part of your project as well, is typically if we haven't made our processes efficient, first of all, the cost of that digital transformation or digital transition is far more expensive, because we're trying to find a product out there to the way we work without actually questioning the way we work. And what software developers will give us is exactly what we ask for. So we'll describe our processes, good, bad, or indifferent, and they will quite frequently design a service or a solution around those processes. And really, if we'd have revised our processes first and made them more efficient, that solution would be a lot more simple, and potentially even off the shelf. So, I mean, it's if you're thinking of digital transformation or taking your business to the next stage from a digital perspective, it's lean first, digital second. You want to make sure your processes are clear, understood, and it will have a direct impact on your cost. And a lot of the lean projects that take place across the country do have an element of digital and digitization as part of the process improvement as well. I don't think yours did have an amount of digital in it, really. It was more
like in Burgolram in particular. They have the handhelds going out from the service right into the invoicing, and it's saving a lot of time on the admin. I think there was about 26 hours a week we've saved on administration within Burgolram. More importantly here, and I think this is the other thing with lean that I tend to forget, is that it's based on your customers as well. We do an awful lot of activities behind the scene. Our customer doesn't care. He doesn't really want to know we have a girl typing for 2 hours and that's in your bill. He doesn't want to know any of that, but he does want the bill in a format that that's suitable for him. Like, that's what lean does. It puts the emphasis on what your customer needs, not what we'd like. So, and that's key.
Yeah, one of the early points at which I start to perhaps lose people and then help them try and think a bit differently is within the workshops, is this point of nobody cares about your business. Right? Nobody. Your customers don't care. As you said, that Dave in accounts or admin has to spend 2 hours writing up a report. Don't care. It's not my problem. They only care, and your customers only care about the problem that you're solving for them. And that problem, in many cases, we talk about in the definition of it's value, the value that you're creating for them. So that's the installation of a security barrier, an alarm, a CCTV system, whatever that might be, the monitoring, how quickly the parts when I go to the counter to buy my components. That's all. Your customer only cares about the problem that they have and not about how long it takes you to do it. So really that switches the onus back onto us, within the business, to say, well, how can we get to that part quicker, better, faster, and higher quality, and get the team involved, and really that's what it's about. But that's tough. It's tough to think that a lot of the hard work we do inside in our business, our customers just don't value. So we have to find ways to do them smarter. But anything else jumped out?
Smarter is, it's a cliche, but it really is working smarter, and focusing on the things that are you're eliminating waste as opposed to doing what you do better. You're just eliminating the waste. That makes it so easy then that you can concentrate on what the customer sees and will pay for.
I think John's first example there, earliest example there, where he talked about the time saved in the workshop or in the warehouse. So we were making frequent trips out and back to the back stores. We brought a smaller consignment of a popular items to under the counter, and that reduced the waste. And the waste that reduced was the waste of motion of the operator, of the warehouse guys walking out, and transport of carrying the product back in. And as you said, that saved 5 hours per man per week after a bit of analysis was done to it. the other waste, John, you saw them
between Burgolram and AES, definitely all 8 were covered. But like and in both, like the inventory with Burgolram would have been a big one, because giving them double stock, to make sure that they're not running out, that wasn't really efficient for AES, like if Burgolram had their own stock and had it looked after, that would be more efficient for both companies. The waiting for a part, by streamlining the whole process, Burgolram got their order in good time, and AES were able to make sure that they had their parts. So all that was there. Non-utilised talent comes along with that, because if you have a technician out on a site and he's standing around because he hasn't got a part, what a waste for both companies. And we found ourselves eliminating extra trips, going to a customer and having to do an extra trip because we didn't have everything that they needed in the first place. They're all covered and so simple, The categories are so broad, but like there's no part of the business that hasn't gained something from it.
They are everywhere within a business for all businesses to see. It is a real challenge, and this is, from a simplicity perspective, this is where it starts. It starts with exploring. If I look around at what I do in the business, I look around at my processes, do any of these wastes occur? Are any of them present in there? Right, wrong, have to be done, part of regulation or not, are they present? And it's using this as the framework to start the conversation. It really doesn't get much more complex than this for most businesses, and this is the starting point. And it's starting to put this lens of waste across everything that you do. So if you're in a hotel or school, alarm company, painters and decorators, matter, you look at what you do. Do any of these wastes occur? If they fall into the category of these wastes, they're either necessary, we have to do them, and they're necessary because of the current technology or health and safety legislation or some other criteria that makes them necessary. But in a lot of cases, they're necessary because of the way we currently do things. If they're not necessary, we should get rid of them straight away, but we should start to question why we're doing them. Like if we take that practice that you mentioned of the Burgolram guys taking twice as much, that sounds like something we hear all the time, of the just in cases. I don't know how many people here on the call today actually have suffer from the just in cases, where you need 2 but you get 4 just in case. And the impact of that then is in your case is, now even if they were separate businesses, the customer then actually buys 2 because they're afraid they won't be able to get more quick from the supplier. That then creates the effect of scarcity in the supplier, so they buy more, although they don't actually need them. And then the customer brings back the one they don't need, and then they've more in stock. And that process of providing one, creating a sales record for it, creating an invoice for it, then processing the return, then actually having too much stock on hand or incorrect levels or high values, it's all of this stuff. And these are small things. They're small processes that we do across the business every day, but they repeat and they repeat and they repeat, and that's where it adds up. Everyone took part and was happy to take part. No,
people were okay with it. They thought, like myself, I suppose, they were skeptical at the start, and when they found out that we weren't standing there with a stopwatch on them, that's not what it was about. I think they took to it a bit better. It made their job a lot easier. A technician doesn't want to be driving from one end of the city to the other because he hasn't got a part. He'd rather be doing what he's good at, And I think the other thing that fascinated me, we took on a couple of guys there towards the start of the year, and the training is much more simple because a lot of the processes that we do, they're documented. We even forced by Michael, I'd say, to photograph and video certain aspects of what they do, and that's done. So honestly, I could actually do it myself. Some of the jobs I can actually go down and do it myself. Not that I want to know or anything, but it makes it that easier. So when a guy is starting out, you can be training him up on these jobs that so easily, So that's a good term for us.
you know, it's interesting that you made this point earlier. It's interesting you made this point earlier on, and I didn't address it at the time. But it allows the member, your team, to get to the work they prefer quicker, you know, and they've less time spent looting and buff and carrying out frustrating tasks and trying to find somebody with the right information, and they can actually get to the work that they probably enjoy a bit better, and that life becomes just a bit easier. The work becomes easier for everybody as well. It is an effort to put the work in, but the return, I think, as you've kind of mentioned today in the various different statements, is there. If you were to say anything to anyone here on the call today in terms of that they were not sure, or you know, whether it's for them, what kind of would you say to people considering taking part in it?
It's not a job we could have done ourselves. I don't think we'd have ever even come up with the idea. We're so used to doing what we do for so long that we wouldn't see it. The beauty of this is that you get a guy who's outside the business, and he doesn't care what business you do either. He's just going to challenge you to look at things, and you start looking at different aspects of your business. And it's a systematic approach, and it's simple. It is really simple. And as you see the rewards coming back, the benefits of it, you actually start getting more involved in it yourself. You know, you start questioning your own activities, even my own day-to-day activity. You know, like Michael gave me the sand, the gravel, and the stones. You know, that task. You know, what I spend my time doing now is completely different to what I spent my time doing a year ago, and that to me is probably the best benefit, because I'm looking ahead, and I know my team are constantly doing what they need to be doing in as efficient manner as we've got to yet, but there's still always room for improvement. You know, so for anybody, it's all I'd say is give it a try. No matter how skeptical you are, you've nothing to lose by it, and the help is fantastic. It is great.
Thanks, John. Just I might just get you just to explain the sand, the gravel, and the stones as a challenge, just for anyone who doesn't know.
Okay. Well, if you fill a glass, you know, with stones and gravel and sand, like, I mean, you know, if the stones are the things you're spending a lot of your time on, you know, you get very few stones in a glass. You get more gravel in it. Do you know what I mean? So maybe the gravel might be added more value to what you're doing, but the sand, that's the gold. That's the stuff where you can get so much more sand into a glass than you could stones. So I was spending a lot of time on the stones, whereas when I started, you know, concentrate on the gravel or just the sand, I got a lot more out of my day, and the company benefited a lot more, you know.
Brilliant. Well, look, John, I just want to say thanks a million. Thanks for giving up your time today. Brilliant.